I'm Emily Chang, and this is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from the week in tech. Coming up, a look inside Dick Costolo's life after Twitter. He joins us for a wide-ranging conversation. Plus, the tech world mobilizes against the FCC with an army of tens of thousands of tech companies. Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian joins us with his take on the fight for net neutrality. And competitive video gamers get their league. Activision Blizzard announces the sale of the first 7 esports team franchises, and New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft went all in. We'll bring you that conversation. First, to our lead, a new hire at Twitter. Former Intuit head of finance Ned Siegel will become chief financial officer effective in late August. He'll report directly to CEO Jack Dorsey. Siegel will assume the role from Anthony Noto, who's been holding down 2 jobs as both chief operating officer and chief financial officer since Adam Bain left. Noto will continue to serve as Twitter's COO. For more reaction on the shakeup, we spoke with Dick Costolo, former CEO of Twitter, who recently returned to the startup world, currently the CEO and co-founder of Chorus Fitness, a personal fitness platform.
As you know, and as I've said many times, I have a lot of confidence in the team over there, Anthony and Jack and Vidya and Leslie Berlin, the CMO. So I'm sure he's a great addition to the team.
We know Twitter had a strong quarter when it came to user growth, but they reported their first quarterly loss. We've seen this new strategy unfolding when it comes to live video partnerships. Do you expect any change in strategy with a new CFO? I mean,
I couldn't say. I'm not being inside the company at this point, but those guys are pretty focused, and they've been pretty clear about what they're working on vis-a-vis live, and I would expect that to continue as long as they're promoting it the way they've been.
So what would you think a mandate of a new COO would be?
CFO. I think it's probably Anthony, taking on more of a day-to-day operating role and really moving fully into the COO role, and obviously then need someone to backfill into the CFO role.
Let's talk about the Trump administration. Obviously, there's been a lot of noise, as we were just reporting. I'm curious, as somebody who started many, many companies over a decade and a half.
Many companies.
2 decades,
but let's just go with many.
What is it like starting a company under the Trump administration? Is it any different?
This feels like one of those questions we should have when we're walking along the pier. Dick, tell us what it's like now for you. To be perfectly honest, it's not that different when you're in the day-to-day trenches of running a startup. You're focused on the hiring pipeline and trying to find the right people on the team, trying to get your bugs out of the beta and the performance of the beta better, and trying to understand the user dynamics of the beta for the kind of consumer stuff we're building. So I would say that, to be perfectly frank, on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't really affect the way we think about what we're doing.
Tech leaders largely came out vocally against Trump, though we haven't yet seen, some of the results of the policies he has promised. We do know that it appears he plans to block these so-called startup visas, which are given to entrepreneurs who come in from foreign countries. How big a deal is this?
I think that's really unfortunate, and I think, to be, again, just sort of blunt about it, I think it's a sign that he's not really paying much of any attention to what the tech leaders are talking to him about, because I can assure you that they would be promoting that idea. It promotes job creation in the U.S. You want the best entrepreneurs in the world starting their companies and building these future big businesses here, and hiring people here, and not doing it elsewhere. And to the extent you can attract them here and enable them to build those companies here and thrive here with a great sort of access to capital and a nourishing of entrepreneurship that we have here, the more of that, the better. So I think it's unfortunate, and probably a sign that not having been in any of those discussions, that it's a little bit paying lip service to listening to tech leaders and not really doing it.
We've seen tech stocks take a bit of a hit the last couple weeks. They also took a hit today in the wake of another presidential email scandal. Putting on your former public company CEO hat, what would you be bracing for in the public markets?
Well, I have thought for a while that the markets have been underpricing risk with everything going on in the world, not just this, but things going on in Europe and elsewhere in the Middle East. And so I guess I would continue to be bracing for what I would have expected by now to be a lot more volatility. I mean, volatility is almost at it has been at record lows recently, and I just, just sort of looking at what's going on, would be surprised if that continues to be the case for an extended period of time.
How about in the private markets? What do you see happening?
Well, it's certainly been the case recently that these very, very late stage private market valuations of companies that are staying private for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years now end up being much higher than, or significantly higher than when those companies debut in the public markets. That's probably going to continue to be the case in the near term, meaning that you'll see companies go public in 18 and maybe early 19 whose late round private valuations were much, much higher than their initial public valuations. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So I see continued lots of money in the private markets chasing few deals, which drives up the prices. And when these things finally see the light of day in the retail markets, they, it sort of probably rightly turns out to be the case that they're not worth as much as their last private rounds were.
Dick Costolo there, former CEO of Twitter and CEO of Chorus Fitness. We're going to hear more from him later on in the show. Well, Uber is handing over the keys to its business in Russia. The company and Yandex, considered the Google of Russia, are merging their ride-hailing businesses. Uber will invest $225 million and take more than a third of a stake in a new venture that'll be valued at more than $3.7 billion. Coming up, Reddit is among the 70,000 websites and organizations protesting the rollback of net neutrality. We will hear from co-founder Alexis Ohanian. Plus, Prime Day has turned from a marketing scheme to a record-breaking event at Amazon. We'll take you behind the scenes. This is Bloomberg. Tech giants are stepping up the fight over net neutrality. A host of internet giants, from Amazon to Facebook, are joining forces to protest the rollback of net neutrality rules. Earlier this year, the FCC voted to start unwinding net neutrality rules put in place by the Obama administration. On one side, internet service providers like AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast, who largely favor less regulation. On the other side, Facebook, Google, Netflix, and other tech giants who could be hurt if the government starts interfering with the internet. It's a proposal that FCC Chairman Ajit Pai has been pushing since its very first day in office. Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian joined us to discuss why this issue is so important.
Reddit has always been at the forefront of fighting for the open internet. This is something that Steve, my co-founder, and I believe in personally, deeply, because that is what gave us the chance to start Reddit in a little apartment with 12 grand in the bank, and 12 years later to have built something that now is the 4th most trafficked site on the internet. Net neutrality made that possible.
You guys go big on your homepage. When you type reddit.com, the site goes dark. You've got a message there. Other companies are telling users to take action. Google, for example, saying, today's open internet ensures that both new and established services, whether offered up by an established internet company like Google, a broadband provider, or a small startup, have the ability to reach users on an equal playing field. Do you think this protest will actually make a difference?
Yes, yeah, because it's been great to see more and more companies come to join our ranks. You obviously, a lot of folks remember the internet blackout that happened because sites like Reddit and Wikipedia were protesting SOPA PIPA, and then the push for getting Title II classification of broadband a few years ago, which helped crystallize a lot of these net neutrality laws. Those happened because platforms and consumers basically had their voices heard, made phone calls. It seems very anachronistic, but calling up your senators or your representative is actually still one of the best ways to get your voice heard. And we now have an audience of hundreds of millions of people across these platforms who are now informed and are now going to be pushed to action. And while the FCC is not beholden to voters, because of course they're appointed by the president, our representatives, our congresspeople, our legislature is. And if we can show that this is an issue that is as bipartisan as we know it is, we can actually get those votes to actually crystallize some good legislation around this.
So we did speak to the FCC commissioner a few months ago who was appointed by President Trump, Ajit Pai. Take a listen to what he had to say about why he thinks this is important.
22 ISPs, small ones, told us just yesterday, Title II hangs over our businesses like a black cloud. And that's the kind of regulatory uncertainty and overreach that we want to remove, because every American deserves better, faster, and cheaper internet, and I'm committed to delivering it to them.
He also makes the argument that less regulation means more innovation, means that the future Facebooks and Googles and Netflixes of the world can grow and develop. How do you respond to that argument?
Well, I only know about it from the perspective of an entrepreneur. I think Chairman Pai is a lawyer. As an entrepreneur, I know that that level playing field that net neutrality ensures guarantees that innovation can thrive, right? At the end of the day, what we want is for the free market to pick winners and losers, not big cable. And net neutrality is what makes the difference between those two things.
So what if the rollback happens? What would the consequences be?
Well, it would only be the start of a conversation that I know America would need to have with their elected officials. But what we could expect is the kind of things that unfortunately won't surprise many people who've dealt with their ISPs before, and that's increased rates. You can imagine an internet that starts to look a lot like your cable television, where you get like a default internet package that may have some news websites you like and some social networking sites you like, but the ones you really love actually have to cost more. And a tiered internet is just, it's fundamentally broken. It's actually pretty offensive an idea to most Americans who want to get access to the websites they want to access, and to so many entrepreneurs who want to know they can start a business and win because they've made something people want, and not lose simply because an incumbent's brokered a deal with one of a handful of ISPs.
The counter-argument is that tech companies have become incredibly powerful, if you look at Google and Facebook and Netflix, and that they're throwing their weight around.
Yeah, well, I think Netflix is a great example, right? This was a company that for years was on our side championing, was on the side of the American people championing net neutrality. And then they got to be really big. And if you remember a couple of months ago, people asked, well, what side of this are you on? And at first, the company said, you know what, we're over it, we've outgrown it, we don't need it. And here is a publicly traded company who's only beholden to their shareholders, who, because of the blowback from their customers, because of the American people, said, just kidding. We actually really do support net neutrality, and we know this is important. And we're expecting a similar thing now to manifest with our senators and representatives, who are going to hear the same thing from their constituents. Because whether you're just a casual internet user trying to look at cute cat photos, or you're a small business owner in Kansas who's trying to start something, you want to have a level playing field as everyone else.
It's interesting, former Twitter CEO Dick Costolo was on the show yesterday talking about the meeting between all of the tech leaders and President Trump that they've been having in Washington, and he suggested that the president isn't listening. He might be holding these meetings, but not actually listening to what tech leaders have to say. What's your message to the administration?
Well, right now, we're primarily focused on the Congress. We think that, especially regarding net neutrality, this is something where the legislature can actually accomplish something that is actually bipartisan and actually what Americans want. Reddit Inc. has actually never taken a formal trip to D.C. before. We actually will in the next month, now that we have a policy team forming. We want to start making relationships with senators and representatives. We haven't had any meetings yet with anyone on the executive side, but really our focus is where we can make immediate impact, and that's on the legislative.
What's the latest on Reddit? We know you recently returned to the company. What kind of progress is the company making?
Well, I got to give so much credit to my co-founder and our CEO, Steve Huffman. The two of us came back full-time a little over 2 years ago, and he has done an amazing job building this company into something really formidable. We're shipping a ton of code. There's over 240 employees now, and both the business and the product have grown significantly under his watch. So exciting times.
That was Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian. Well, Microsoft is out to make high-speed internet more accessible throughout the United States. The tech giant announced a new campaign dubbed the Rural Airband Initiative, which will aim to eliminate the gap in high-speed internet access in the country's hardest-to-reach areas. The effort would eliminate the broadband gap over the next 5 years, starting by funding projects in 12 U.S. states in the upcoming year. By 2022, Microsoft plans to provide fast internet to 2 million people. Coming up, we are turning our focus to Asia, where China's great internet firewall could get even tougher to penetrate. Plus, we are on the ground at the Taobao Maker Festival in Hangzhou, China. We'll show you which gadgets the youngest consumers in the country are gravitating towards. This is Bloomberg. This week, the Chinese government said it will not disrupt legitimate access to the global internet by businesses and general users. The response comes after Bloomberg reported that China had ordered telecom carriers to bar individuals from using VPN services to circumvent its Great Firewall. The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology said in a statement that trade or multinational enterprises, if they require leased lines or other methods to access the internet abroad, can turn to authorized telecommunication entities. The existing notice will not affect normal operations. Blocking VPNs essentially shuts down a major window to the global internet, which helps users bypass restrictions in China, where thousands of websites are currently blocked. Bloomberg's Peter Elstrom, managing editor for Asia Tech, joins us to discuss.
China has been playing this game of cat and mouse with virtual private networks for many years, where for a while people use a certain VPN and it works pretty effectively to be able to get access to Facebook, Twitter, and other websites that are normally blocked. But then the Chinese government will crack down. So what we're seeing now is a much more comprehensive approach where the government is going to the three major telecom companies, all state-backed, and asking them to block all VPN services accessing the outside world for individuals. So that's a pretty big step for them to try to tighten up on the censorship around their internet and try to block people from getting outside of China and then access to these websites that they want to be blocked.
I've played that same cat and mouse game, having lived in China, having traveled to China. You use a VPN for a while, and then suddenly it stops working, and then you go on to use another VPN. So my question is, in practice, how is this actually going to be different from the status quo?
Well, I think conventional wisdom has been that China is not going to be able to keep this up, that eventually China is going to have to open up its internet. Other people are going to be able to get access, and Chinese people will be able to get access to websites outside of the country. What we're seeing now is really a serious tightening of that. As you mentioned, expats certainly do this all the time to be able to get access to Twitter or Google or Gmail or Google Maps, for that matter. You sort of need it. And it's not just expats, it's other people too who want to get access to all the information that's blocked on these websites, including the New York Times and, of course, Bloomberg.com too. So we're seeing a much more serious crackdown. The president of the country, Xi Jinping, has talked about cyber sovereignty and how he wants to maintain control over China's internet. It's a pretty radical move, and it looks like he is determined to keep that kind of control. That, of course, opens up tons of opportunities for Chinese companies, because U.S. companies and many of the most powerful American internet companies are not able to operate in the country.
So what does it mean for multinational companies that operate in China? Because they've been operating in this legal gray area as well, where they can use VPNs, but only internally. Would this new rule affect them?
Well, it's important to distinguish. This rule, according to what the sources have told us, again, this is based on people familiar. There has not been an official announcement at this point, but the restrictions are going to be individuals' use of VPN, not the corporate use of VPN, which can be for many different reasons. But in terms of the individuals, what you're going to see is many of the individuals inside of China who have been using services like Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, are not going to be able to access those sites. So they're going to lose thousands of users on many of these websites. So that's a significant deal. It's not clear what kind of opportunities those companies are going to have beyond this.
What does this mean, or what could this mean for the companies that have been blocked all this time, whether it's Facebook or Twitter? The conversation has been for the last several years, will they ever be unblocked? Now this seems to be a massive step in the opposite direction.
Well, these companies, including Facebook, as you mentioned, have been very determined to get into China in some sort of way. Google was in China for a while and then decided to pull out because it didn't want to comply with the censorship there. It will put more pressure on them to find new ways around this. I'm sure the people at Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, are looking for alternatives. And the creativity of people inside of China to get around this great firewall has been pretty amazing over the years. This is a pretty serious step in tightening this up, but there may be alternative ways that they'll be able to discover at some point in the future to get around the firewall.
What might it mean for a company like Airbnb, which, as we know, has hired a China-based CEO to focus on expanding in China, where other companies, like all the ones we've mentioned, and Uber, have tried and failed?
Well, Airbnb, of course, runs quite a different business. It's not really information or a media business in any sense, so they may not face the same kind of restrictions. The market has been open to Western companies to come into a certain respect. But the Chinese technology companies have been very strong. Airbnb in particular is competing with a couple of local players that are very powerful. We may see a repeat of the efforts for American e-commerce companies to compete with Alibaba, for example, where Alibaba ended up winning and really taking the market. You've got many strong players, so it will be kind of a case-by-case basis.
That was Bloomberg Tech's Peter Elstrom. Sticking with China, e-commerce giant Alibaba is taking a page from the Amazon Go cashless convenience store, showcasing a similar Tao Cafe concept in its hometown of Hangzhou. Bloomberg's Asia correspondent Stephen Engel got a first-hand look at the youth-focused Taobao Maker Festival that features other so-called new retail strategies that integrate online with offline shopping.
The Taobao Maker Festival is where the virtual world meets the physical. Some 108 Taobao vendors here selling their wares, and the target really are the millennials in China on their smartphones buying all kinds of stuff. Ni hao.
Ni hao.
The festival, in its second year, is double the size of last year's and is an offline showcase for China's young entrepreneurs who've built successful online shops without the crippling brick-and-mortar overhead. Whether it's the latest in eye-popping design or body-socking virtual reality combat, the Taobao Festival represents the new youth-driven consumer economy in China. In fact, a quarter of the vendors here in Hangzhou are so-called 90后, those born after 1990. And in this melee, the generation gap was all too evident.
I have no idea what I just did. Once you open it up.
30-year-old Zuni Lin, though, knew exactly what he was doing when he started making these portable and professional folding electric guitars.
In Taobao, this is the only way we could get so many exposures in a short time. We only existed for like 2 years.
How many have you sold?
About 1,000.
Now, are all your customers in China, or you're selling overseas as well?
We are selling to the US too. We have distributors there already, but we just started.
Alibaba too is just starting its Tao Cafe new retail concept, targeting, of course, young consumers who are more adept at using mobile wallets. It's grab-and-go, cashless and cashierless convenience.
Much like the Amazon Go concept, this Tao Cafe has its flaws. For example, you can't have too many shoppers in the shop at the same time. Right now in this beta trial, it can kind of overwhelm the system. But for Alibaba, it pays off. It gets shoppers, the online shoppers, to use their Alipay in the offline world. And right now, that is data that is very valuable.
Bloomberg's Stephen Engel there reporting from Hangzhou, China. Well, a new hire for SoftBank, Michael Ronan, a top executive at Goldman Sachs, is leaving the firm to join Masayoshi Son's planned $100 billion SoftBank Vision Fund. This, according to people familiar with the matter. Ronan has worked on many large tech deals in recent years, including SoftBank's push for majority control of Sprint in 2013. He's also been involved with putting together the Vision Fund earlier in the year. Coming up, Amazon calls its third annual Prime Day record-breaking. We break down the history and anticipation around the 30-hour shopping event next. And a reminder that all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Amazon's third annual Prime Day ended up being its biggest ever global shopping event, surpassing sales on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. The event grew by more than 60% over the last year, generating about $1 billion in revenue. The 30-hour event also saw more new members joining Prime than any other day. We took a look at the history of Prime Day and how Amazon took a page directly from Alibaba's handbook.
Amazon is rolling out its third annual Prime Day in a bigger way than ever before. The manufactured holiday was extended to 30 hours with more than 100,000 new deals for Prime members around the globe. The e-commerce giant is offering new deals every 5 minutes on products like the Amazon Echo and flat-screen TVs. Amazon services are also on offer. One flashy deal, 4 months of unlimited music, costing Prime members just 99 cents. But Amazon can't take all the credit for coming up with this extravagant shopping event. The company, run by Jeff Bezos, took a page straight out of Alibaba's handbook. For years, the Chinese e-commerce giant has capitalized on 11/11, aka Singles Day, in China, turning the anti-Valentine's Day into one of the biggest shopping holidays of the year. On Singles Day in 2016, Alibaba racked up almost $18 billion in sales in the 24-hour event. But comparing Singles Day to Prime Day isn't completely fair. Alibaba has been running this show since 2009. Amazon only started these promotions in 2015. Another key difference, Prime Day is only available to the approximately 85 million Prime customers, while Alibaba's event is open to all online shoppers around the world. While Prime Day is still in its early stages, it's already showing signs of being a big success. When Amazon held its first Prime Day in July 2015, it marked a turning point for the stock price. Over the past 2 years, Amazon shares have gained almost 120% in value. Amazon may have some catching up to do, but if it continues to follow in the footsteps of Alibaba, Amazon may be writing a Prime success story of its own.
And right before the official kickoff of Amazon Prime Day, Bloomberg's editor-at-large, Corey Johnson, traveled to Seattle to speak with David Clark, Amazon's Senior Vice President of Worldwide Operations, and ask how we should understand Amazon's global fulfillment space.
Right now, around the world, we have over 150 million square feet of fulfillment space, hundreds of thousands of employees. And when a customer places an order, we decide which fulfillment center it's going to come from. We try to ship from as close as we can to the customer, but when you have this vast selection that we carry with you over 50 million SKUs, many of them, there's only 1 or 2 of them. And so we have a 2-day promise in the U.S. And so if you're in New York and need a product, and it's in the only place it is in Seattle or California, this is how you get it, through one of these cargo planes or through one of our partners.
Should we think, when I read the 10K, it talks about lease facilities, which is the majority of the fulfillment centers, and does that make any difference to you guys?
It really doesn't. It's just we think of these places are all largely custom designed with our engineering and fulfillment processes or sortation and transportation in mind, and it's just whichever financial vehicle we choose is the best way to move forward with the asset.
Now, how many planes have got this fancy paint job on?
Well, we've got 24 planes flying right now, headed to 40 in 2018.
And are they all festooned with Amazon?
I think there are 8 right now that do not. The first 8 that rolled out, we got in service quickly and did not put the design on. All the planes since have been.
I ask because I wonder what the advantage of that is.
Well, the advantage is we get to stand in front of it and it looks really cool.
Absolutely.
If you have cool toys like this, you need to put your name on them, right?
I would imagine it helps you promote the brand constantly.
It does. It's fun it's amazing how many people pull into the airport. I find these pictures all the time, plane spotters and people traveling who find a Amazon plane on the tarmac, and just it's cool for customers and employees alike to see them flying around.
But here we are on Air Cargo Road here at SeaTac, and it's got to be a reminder to the other air cargo companies, the FedExes, the UPSs, and so on, that you guys are here and you've got options.
Well, I think if you go over to their places right now, you also see a lot of Amazon boxes in those places as well. We have a great group of carrier partners around the world. I expect that to continue. This is all about both innovating for customers and supplementing available capacity. But again, we have great partners, expect to continue to do so.
How much of this is going to be fulfillment center to fulfillment center movement of product?
Almost all of this is actually package transport. Now what we do is some of this is direct package transport, meaning instead of having to go through a hub, we know that we have a large portion of volume going from the West Coast to the East Coast. We can fly directly point to point, take a step out of the process, which allows us to make the cutoffs much later for customers. So on a 2-day order, you might have an initial 12 hours or so to order and still get your product because we can go directly from point to point instead of
having to go. So you might be at a Procter & Gamble facility in Ohio and realize you need to get to Phoenix and you don't have to fly it through Memphis as FedEx.
We could, or maybe there's this one unique, you have a particular record player stylus that you need, and there's only one of them that we have, and it's in New York, and it needs to come to you in San Francisco. We'll put that on a plane, and instead of having to fly it to Cincinnati or Louisville or Memphis and connect and then go to San Francisco, we can put it on our plane from the East Coast directly to our San Francisco hub and get it to you, and you have much longer to order it instead of just going point to point.
Now, in terms of percentage domestic capacity, when you get to 40 planes, where will that be in terms of how much of the stuff that you're moving? Yeah,
we're not specifically stating what our breakdown is around our different carriers.
But is that how you guys are thinking about it?
Well, we think of it as more on what customer demand. Again, we start everything with the customer and work backwards. So, what portion of the customer demand is best suited to go through the paths or the arcs that we create to enable faster delivery, and that we work backwards from that.
And when you have negotiations with the carriers, and I'm not talking about financial negotiations, but sort of how they're going to service you or service the business of Amazon, which ultimately is to service your customer, do you have those kinds of discussions like, hey, we could really use a route that goes from point B to point D, and you don't have one like that?
Well, we have very strategic partnerships with all of our carriers. As you can imagine, in order to make the holiday work, in order to make our growth rates work, it's very important that we have a great relationship with them. And so we partner in almost every aspect of how the operations work with them in order to ensure we're aligned.
In terms of the plane business itself, it's a very complicated business involving leasing, as I shout over the planes as they fly above us, but involving leasing, involving a whole different finance things. Are there things about the Amazon balance sheet that make this, that give you advantages here that you might not, that other companies might not have?
Well, our focus really in the planes from the beginning has been all about the customer experience side of this. It's been all about enabling faster delivery and also enabling additional capacity for customers.
Right.
Our approach to structuring the arrangements, as you said, there's a lot of moving parts in the airplane business, and we found a couple of great partners, we think, in Atlas and ATSG, and we've worked with them to come up with a great path forward. We think that fits both the company needs, works great for them, and for the supplier, and provides a fantastic service to customers.
Now, was this a typical Amazon project that started off with a memo and said, hey, what if we tried this, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks?
It did. It actually started. We actually had somebody came to us and sort of pointed out that we hadn't realized exactly that we had this much scale in air. And when we looked at it, we said, this is right. We really could. And then it went exactly to what you just said. We went out, we wrote a 6-pager, we wrote a working backwards document for what would a Prime Air product for air cargo for Amazon customers look like, what would make it different, what would make it special for customers, what would enable sort of lower prices and faster delivery for customers, and ended up with this.
And you said scale. Is there a metric on that scale?
No, it's just about as we continue to grow, that growth provides us options to new things that perhaps we couldn't do in the past. It could be something like Prime Now, our 1-hour delivery service. We had to reach a certain scale to where our logistics infrastructure and technology for both fulfillment and delivery enabled that 1-hour service. Same thing here. We needed enough volume where moving from coast to coast made both sort of utilization and financial sense to be able to provide that service for customers.
There's one last thing. Is the change in sort of Amazon's approach to local taxes, is that the thing that sort of propelled this whole business to get closer and closer physically to the customer?
I think we've always had the same approach, which is we follow all applicable laws, and we continue to spread across the U.S. And I don't think anything particular to tax had anything to do with this. This was really all about customers.
That was David Clark, Amazon Senior Vice President of Worldwide Operations, with our very own Corey Johnson. Now, in deal news out of China, Stripe struck a deal with Alipay and WeChat to allow online merchants that use the company's payment processing technology to receive money from users of the two massive Chinese apps. Alipay and WeChat each boast about 500 million users and dominate the digital payment space in China, making up about 90% of market share. Coming up, more from our conversation with former Twitter CEO Dick Costolo. He weighs in on how Silicon Valley can fight back against bro culture. Plus, esports draws in some major investors, including New England Patriots owner Bob Kraft. We'll hear from Kraft and Activision CEO Bobby Kotick. This is Bloomberg. Back to my interview with Dick Costolo, former CEO of Twitter. In part 2 of our conversation, we discussed tech's ongoing gender problem amidst a string of sexual harassment allegations against male VCs and the rising criticism of bro culture in Silicon Valley.
It's a problem, and I think it's probably actually maybe understated and underreported. It's probably way worse than we've seen so far. And I think that, again, just to be blunt about it, I think in a lot of cases, the investors in some of these venture firms are simply ignoring it and maybe paying lip service to it, but ignoring it and then funding some of these enterprises anyway. It's widely understood that some of these issues were things that had been said in the background, and yet new funds were raised and on and on and on. So I think that until the capital being committed, by these LPs to these venture funds starts to really take it seriously and invest in more directly in women who are running these funds and in maybe gender-specific funds or people of color funds, you're going to continue to see lip service paid to this because when push comes to shove, the money's flowing into these funds anyway, even when they've heard about some of these things.
We've seen a lot of long-winded apologies. Do you buy it?
I mean, it's hard for me to comment on that stuff because, I'm not in either of the shoes, both either the victims or the predators. So I don't know. It's weird when, it's a pattern, it's a pattern, it's a pattern, it's a pattern, and now that something comes out, it's, oh gosh. So that is a bit, you look askew at that a little bit.
Reid Hoffman is encouraging VCs to sign a decency pledge, talking about a third-party HR function that would oversee the relationship between VCs and entrepreneurs. Is that a realistic solution?
I'll tell you, I just don't think that that's sufficient. It's like saying listen, I love Reid. I understand what he's trying to do. But the answers seem more dramatic to me. Why aren't people funding, women-only GP, funds where the GPs are all women? There are certainly plenty of funds where the GPs are all men, and I just don't see those things getting funded. And instead of saying to the people who are already in these guys-only partnerships, do you promise to do X, Y, Z? I'd like to see a lot more money flowing to, you know what? There are a lot of smart women in the Valley. A lot of them are in the venture business. Let's go enable a few of them to create their own fund and get after it. There are new funds launching all the time. These people are able to get people are able to get funds raised with what I would even go as far as to say aren't records you would look at and say, yeah, I'm going to fund that new venture fund. So there are plenty of super qualified women out there, and I would like to see more of the LPs and institutional investors putting their money where their mouth is in the venture side.
Quickly, I know that you are very focused on hiring women at Chorus and at a smaller stage, making sure that it's 50-50. What is your vision for this company?
It's a social fitness platform. Our vision for the company is that in the real world, the way people get healthy and live healthy lives is through social motivation and social accountability. And yet online, most fitness platforms are one-on-one. Here's a program for you. And then you go and do it and try to keep yourself motivated in isolation. Chorus is all about getting a team of people together to help each other stay motivated, to do what they want to do and do what they've committed to do and help each other be successful.
When's it coming out? It's in beta right now.
It's in beta right now and we're working on the user dynamics of it. I have like 3 or 4 more things we really want to do, so I'd say late this fall.
Dick Costolo, former CEO of Twitter and co-founder and CEO of Chorus Fitness. Well, Facebook is taking another stab at turning its Oculus Rift virtual reality headset into a mass market phenomenon. The company plans to unveil a cheaper wireless device that the company is betting will popularize VR the way Apple did the smartphone. People familiar with the development say the headset will sell for as little as $200 and need not be tethered to a PC or a phone. Coming up, interest in esports has been on the rise in the last year. Now, professional sports teams are getting in on the action and investing millions. We'll hear from New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft and Activision CEO Bobby Kotick. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Razer is shooting for a Hong Kong IPO that could value the gaming gear maker at as much as $5 billion and help fund development of its own mobile phone. The company is said to be developing a mobile device tailored for its consumer base of hardcore gamers. Razer sells its products via e-commerce giants JD.com and Alibaba, and in chains like Best Buy across the U.S. It sold $1 billion worth of products globally in the last 3 years. Sticking with gaming, video game giant Activision Blizzard announced the sale of its franchises in the Overwatch League, the first major esports league with city-based teams. Among the buyers, New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft. I spoke with Kraft and Activision CEO Bobby Kotick from the Allen & Company conference in Sun Valley, Idaho, and started by asking Kraft why he made the move to esports.
We love the infrastructure that Bobby has set up at Activision Blizzard, and we've looked at a lot, and the Overwatch League to us, with having 30 million players at this point and just in its evolution, really appeals to us. And the concept of having a team in the New England region, we know we have an infrastructure that we can really do a great job with the development of that, and being part of something that can be globalized is very, very relevant to us.
I want to talk a little bit about the finances here. Bobby, how long do you think it will take before the Overwatch League can compete with those leagues financially?
Well, look, it's important to us. We have a 26-year history of providing superior returns to our owners. And so we look at owners like Robert Kraft as an important constituent that we need to do our very best to provide a superior financial return as quickly as we can.
Now, Bob, the franchise fee is $20 million over time. How much will it cost to operate a team in addition to that?
We haven't really gotten into the details of the operating costs, but when you look at the way we've structured the league, the operating costs should be a lot lower than what you'd see in other traditional sports.
Okay, so let's talk about the future of esports. I mean, esports on television still hasn't been a great success. Bob, why do you think it can get there?
Well, we're looking at what's going on with sports generally and watching the millennials and the Z generation, how they consume product on their mobile devices, but also how they don't watch traditional sports products the way our generations did. And you see how much time is invested in playing these games and how they can connect with a global audience while doing it. It's just unheard of to us 10, 15 years ago. And we really believe this is the future. We think the infrastructure that Bobby has set up was something that the investment that he made in this league, it's something that was very appealing to us and a great way for us to enter this business. We looked at a lot of alternatives, and we felt this was the best way to do it.
So, Bobby, how much will players make? Can you give us an idea of that?
Look, I think the whole purpose for creating the Overwatch League was in the service of celebrating our players and the commitment that our players make to this game in what's now 196 countries around the world. And so there isn't any good reason that a professional Overwatch player shouldn't be rewarded and recognized like professional athletes. And our hope is that that's what will happen, and it will happen as quickly as possible.
And what do you see as the biggest source of revenue of the future? Will it be TV rights, tickets, or sponsorships?
Well, all of those will be the revenues, but the great opportunity for us is being able to partner with these incredibly successful owners and the young entrepreneurs who have built a lot of the endemic teams, who are really these high potential entrepreneurs that seized on esports as a great opportunity. And so the combination of the professional experience like we get with Robert Kraft and the great capabilities we see in some of our endemic owners, that should allow us to generate revenues in the broadcast rights, in sponsorships, in licensing, in venue fees, and a big part of what we're trying to do in building a local-based league is build the local affinity that you see in traditional sports, so that the Boston enthusiasts, the Boston players of Overwatch, will have a place to go, will have heroes they can celebrate, will have role models that come from the professional athletes that are going to play our games, and so that's a really important part of what we're doing.
Bloomberg has reported that TV networks, including ESPN, are bracing for a drop in ad revenue based on NFL ratings last season. How do you respond to that?
Well, we're really here to talk about esports, Emily.
No, but I'll do it. I think anyone who looks at last year understands the role that the election had, and look what the two news networks, our main news networks, are doing this year. I think after the election was over, the NFL was within 2% of ratings last year. I feel very confident that we're going to have very strong ratings this coming year, and you just wait and see, and remember I told you that.
My conversation there with Activision CEO Bobby Kotick and Bob Kraft, Chairman and CEO of the Kraft Group and the New England Patriots. Finally, net neutrality issues also being discussed at the annual conference in Sun Valley, hosted by Allen & Company. Tim Armstrong, CEO of Oath, Verizon's internet media business, gave us his take.
I think there's a lot of energy around making net neutrality work overall. I think when you zoom into Verizon's put out, William Johnson put out a really clear statement out of the company, which basically said, look, Verizon supports net neutrality. It's been penciled in. Congress should pass real laws around it and cement it. So I think that it's great. There's a day of action, that's been organized, and I think all of those things are really positive.
And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. Next week, we will bring you interviews from the Fortune Brainstorm Tech Conference in Aspen, Colorado. Do not miss our conversation with Marnie Levine, Instagram COO, and Penny Pritzker, former U.S. Commerce Secretary. Remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays. That is all for now. This is Bloomberg.